A young millionaire decided to use a bull as bait to attract bears, but no one could have predicted what happened next. The animal's reaction was so unexpected that even experts were stunned. Watch until the end and subscribe to the channel to find out why this scene is going viral. Crie uma narrativa dramática e cativante em polones, utilizando nomes de personagens de origem polonesa e ambiente a história em algum lugar da Polônia, que faça sentido com a premissa enviada, seguindo estas diretrizes. Obedeça rigorosamente às seguintes instruções. 1. Atue como um autor de telenovela. 2. Escreva uma história apaixonante que mantenha o espectador até o final, com reviravoltas e uma revelação argumental no clímax para gerar um pico de emoção ainda maior. 3. Não inclua mortes nem crimes na história. 4. O tema da história será fornecido ao final do prompt. 5. A história deve ter exatamente entre 12.000 e 13.000 palavras. Não ultrapasse nem fique abaixo desse limite. 6. Divida a história em 5 capítulos. 7. Ao finalizar a história, escreva fim da história. 8. Inclua uma chamada à ação no final, incentivando o público a se inscrever no canal, deixar likes e comentar. Esta chamada deve ser criativa e organicamente integrada à narrativa. 9. Use o exemplo a seguir como inspiração para a chamada. A ação, adaptando-o à sua história. Queridos oyentes, esperamos que a história de Amanda e Beatriz los haya conmovido. Para seguir este viaje emocional, hemos preparado una playlist especial con historias igualmente cautivadoras. Encuéntrenla aquí haciendo clic a su izquierda. Si les gustó esta historia, no olviden suscribirse a nuestro canal y darle me gusta al video. Todos los días traemos historias únicas que exploran la complejidad de la vida. No se pierdan nuestros próximos contenidos. Los esperamos en los comentarios. 10. Você deve abrir um artefato novo para cada capítulo que você criar. Cada artefato somente deve ter um capítulo, e cada capítulo com no mínimo 200 palavras e no máximo 1.400 palavras. Nunca corte uma palavra no meio. 11. Quando você se comunicar comigo fora do artefato, fale em português. 12. Não perca a coesão e coerência entre um capítulo e outro. O roteiro deve ser envolvente do começo ao final para prender a atenção das pessoas. 13. Em cada capítulo que você criar, não deve quebrar a palavra no meio. Sempre termine a frase com coesão para uma continuação lógica e fluida do próximo capítulo. 14. Não utilize linguagem de códigos. 15. Nunca mencione morte ou crime. Organizado, cartéis. Nunca dê detalhes de como uma pessoa morreu. Sempre substitua, quando possível, a palavra morte por algum substantivo. 16. Você não deve entregar toda a trama logo no começo. Isso deve ser gradativo conforme a história vai se desenrolando. 17. Garanta transições suaves e naturais entre cenas, usando reflexões internas e conectores temporais para manter a fluidez e lógica contínua. E 18. Comece direto na história sem revelar o desfecho. 19. O desfecho deve ser revelado de forma gradual para que assim os ouvintes possam ficar engajados na história do começo ao final. 20. Comece a história sem preâmbulos, sem enrolação. 21. Nunca saia do que está na premissa, isso e uma ordem. 22. Siga rigorosamente todas as diretrizes acima. 23. Você nunca deve terminar um artefato cortando palavras ou parágrafos. 24. Escrever o texto sem formatar, sem negrita na letra ou espaçamento em linha, que seja texto puro. The morning mist hung low over Silver Creek Ranch as dawn broke on the third day of the operation. Ferdinand had settled into a routine of sorts, grazing in methodical patterns across the enclosure. occasionally lifting his head to stare at the surrounding forest with unreadable eyes. The bull's initial agitation had given way to a stoic resignation that the technical crew mistook for adaptation. In the command center, night shift personnel handed over to the day team, their faces drawn from hours of staring at screens showing nothing but a peaceful bull and empty forest. No sign of Monarch yet, despite the scent stations and additional lures that had been placed progressively closer to the enclosure. Blake burst through the door at 7:30 a.m., earlier than anyone had expected him. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his growing impatience. "Nothing?" he demanded, scanning the bank of monitors. Rachel Chen, the head of technical operations, shook her head. "No bear activity within range of our sensors overnight. But that's not unusual. These things take time." Blake poured himself coffee from the expensive machine he'd had shipped in. "Time is a luxury we don't have. Subscribers are already asking for previews, and all we can show them is a bull eating grass." He turned to Dr. Morris, who was reviewing data at a corner workstation. "I thought you were supposed to be an expert. Why isn't your bear taking the bait?" Dr. Morris didn't look up from his screen. "Monarch isn't my bear, Mr. Harrington, and wildlife behavior isn't something you can program like your streaming service. If anything, the fact that he hasn't approached despite the lures suggests he's even more intelligent than we initially believed. Or he's just not there," Blake countered. "Maybe your tracking data is flawed." "The data is solid," Rachel interjected, pulling up thermal imaging captured by drones overnight. Mom, boom. Look here. This heat signature was recorded at 2:17 a.m., approximately 1 mile from the enclosure. The size and movement pattern are consistent with an adult male grizzly. Blake leaned closer, studying the glowing blob on the screen. "So he's nearby but avoiding us. What will change that?" Dr. Morris finally looked up. "Nothing should change that. Bears avoiding human activity is natural and healthy behavior. If you truly wanted to observe natural interactions, you'd let both animals make their own choices." "That's not how this works," Blake snapped. "We have schedules and subscribers. If Monarch won't come to us willingly, we need to be more persuasive." Olivia, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, Blake?" Before he could answer, a technician called out, "Movement at the northeast perimeter, bear signature approaching sensor array 7. All eyes turned to the central monitor as a massive shape emerged from the tree line, staying just at the edge of visibility. The grizzly moved with surprising grace for a creature of its size, pausing occasionally to test the air with its sensitive nose. "Monarch," Dr. Morris whispered, a note of reverence in his voice. "That's definitely him." Blake's irritation vanished instantly, replaced by electric excitement. "Get every camera on him. Deploy the drones, but keep them at maximum distance. I don't want them spooking him." "He's just watching," Rachel noted, as minutes passed with the bear remaining stationary, partially hidden by underbrush. "Assessing the situation." Dr. Morris nodded. "Classic apex predator behavior. He's evaluating potential threats before committing to an approach." "How long will this phase last?" Blake demanded. "It could be minutes or days," Dr. Morris replied, "or he might decide the situation isn't worth investigating further and leave entirely." Blake paced the length of the command center. "That's not acceptable. We need to incentivize him." "The bull is already the incentive," Olivia pointed out. "If Monarch isn't approaching, there's a reason." Blake stopped pacing abruptly. "What if Ferdinand isn't visible enough from that distance? Move him to the side of the enclosure closest to where Monarch is watching." Dr. Morris shook his head. "We agreed to minimal interference. The animals should be free to—" "This is my operation," Blake cut him off. "And I'm saying move the bull. After a tense moment, Dr. Morris nodded to a handler who reluctantly entered the enclosure with a prod to guide Ferdinand toward the desired location. The bull resisted initially, then complied with reluctant steps. On the monitor, Monarch's reaction was immediate. The bear retreated several yards into denser cover, still visible but clearly more cautious. "He doesn't like the human activity," Dr. Morris observed. "You're making him less likely to approach, not more." Blake ignored the comment, watching intently as the handler exited the enclosure and Monarch gradually relaxed his posture. Over the next hour, the bear slowly, methodically circled the perimeter of the cleared area, always maintaining his distance, always watching. "He's mapping the territory," Rachel suggested, fascinated by the deliberate pattern, learning the layout. As dusk approached, the bear finally retreated back into the forest, leaving the team with hours of footage of what essentially amounted to a large bear taking a careful walk. Blake wasn't pleased. That's it. All that build-up for nothing. He slammed his hand on a desk, causing several technicians to jump. This isn't the content people are paying for. "It's only day 3, Olivia reminded him. "The fact that Monarch appeared at all is promising." Blake wasn't consoled. "I want options on my desk by morning. If this bear won't give us what we need naturally, we'll create the right conditions." As the day shift prepared to hand over to night personnel, Olivia pulled Dr. Morris aside. "He's getting impatient. You should prepare for him to push boundaries." The biologist nodded grimly. "I've worked with his type before. They see nature as something to be conquered rather than respected." He glanced at the monitor showing Ferdinand, now resting in a corner of the enclosure. "I'm more worried about what happens if he gets what he wants. Monarch is no ordinary bear. There's something different about him." Night fell over Silver Creek Ranch, bringing with it a stillness that seemed to amplify every sound. The night shift settled in, monitoring. Equipment humming softly in the background. Around midnight, Sensor 7 triggered again. "He's back," announced Kyle, one of the night technicians, straightening in his chair. "Same spot as before." On the thermal imaging, Monarch's heat signature was unmistakable as he emerged from the tree line. This time, however, he moved with more confidence, advancing to within 30 yards of the enclosure before stopping. Ferdinand, who had been sleeping, suddenly rose to his feet. The bull turned to face the direction of the bear, his massive head held high. There was no panic in his posture, only alert attention. "Are you recording this?" Kyle asked his colleague Jessica. "Every angle," she confirmed, typing commands to ensure backup systems were also capturing the moment. For nearly 20 minutes, bear and bull regarded each other across the barrier of the fence. Neither animal made aggressive movements. They simply observed one another with what the humans watching couldn't help but interpret as mutual curiosity. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, Monarch turned and melted back into the darkness of the forest. Ferdinand remained standing for several minutes before finally lowering himself back to the ground, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the bear had been. Kyle immediately sent the footage to Blake with a message. First extended visual contact established. By dawn, Blake had watched the encounter more than a dozen times. He summoned the entire team to the command center as soon as they arrived. "This is good," he announced, playing the footage on the main screen. "But it's not enough. I need more. Direct interaction." Dr. Morris frowned. "What you're seeing is already remarkable. Predator-prey dynamics without aggression triggers are rarely documented this clearly." "Our subscribers aren't paying for a nature documentary," Blake retorted. "They want drama, conflict resolution, primal forces colliding. Even if that's not what would naturally occur," Dr. Morris challenged. Blake's expression hardened. "We're creating a controlled environment for these interactions. That's been the plan from day one." As the team dispersed to their stations, Olivia lingered behind with Blake. The footage we have is already generating buzz with the preview audience. Maybe we should consider framing this differently, the unexpected peace between natural enemies. It could be a unique angle. Blake shook his head. You know our demographic. They want raw nature, tooth and claw. Ferdinand was bred for perfect conformation and genetics. Monarch survived 2 decades in one of America's most challenging wilderness areas. Their meeting should reflect that power. And if it doesn't, then we'll help nature along. Blake's tone made it clear the discussion was over. Throughout the day, Monarch made 3 more appearances, each time coming slightly closer to the enclosure, but never approaching the fence directly. Ferdinand's behavior remained calm, almost unnaturally so, for a domesticated animal in proximity to a predator. By the 5th day, patterns began to emerge that puzzled the technical team. Review of overnight footage showed strange anomalies. Several camera traps failed simultaneously during a 2-hour window when drone sensors indicated Monarch was in the vicinity. When the cameras came back online, there were inexplicable gaps in their memory cards. Equipment failure, Blake suggested during the morning briefing. Rachel shook her head, clearly troubled. Not likely. These are redundant systems with separate power sources. And the pattern is specific. Look at this map. She displayed a diagram showing the location of affected cameras. Together, they created a path that, if unmonitored, would allow approach to the enclosure from the northeast without detection. What are you suggesting? Blake asked, studying the pattern. Rachel hesitated. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just pointing out that the pattern is non-random. It's a coincidence, Blake dismissed. Focus on getting the systems back to full operational status. Later that afternoon, Dr. Morris approached Blake as he was reviewing marketing materials for the upcoming live stream. We found something you should see. The biologist led Blake to the edge of the clearing where the enclosure stood. About 20 yards into the tree line, he pointed to the ground. There, perfectly preserved in a patch of soft earth, was a massive bear track. That's Monarch's print, Dr. Morris said. But that's not what's unusual. He pointed to a series of marks around the print. At first, Blake couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. Then the pattern resolved in his mind. Are those smaller tracks? Another bear? Dr. Morris shook his head slowly. No, look closer. Blake knelt for a better view and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The marks around the primary track were deliberate. Someone or something had drawn a perfect circle around Monarch's footprint using a pointed stick. One of the crew playing games, Blake suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. No one on my team would do this, Dr. Morris said firmly. And look at the timing. These marks were made immediately after the print, before any dew or wind could affect it. Whoever or whatever did this was right behind Monarch. Blake stood up, brushing dirt from his designer jeans. I don't have time for mysteries or superstitions. We're going live with the main event in 2 days, and so far all we have is footage of 2 animals staring at each other. Dr. Morris met his gaze directly. I think you should consider postponing. There are elements at work here that we don't understand. The only thing I understand is that I have investors and subscribers expecting a return on their investment, Blake replied coldly. Make sure Ferdinand is positioned optimally tomorrow. I want Monarch to have every opportunity to approach directly. As Blake walked away, Dr. Morris stared down at the encircled print, unable to shake the feeling that they were no longer the only ones observing this encounter. Somewhere in the gathering shadows of the forest, something was watching them watch the animals, and it had its own agenda entirely. Dawn broke over Silver Creek Ranch on the 6th day, with a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the operation. The technical team moved with the efficiency of people who knew a deadline was approaching, but their conversations were hushed, punctuated by furtive glances toward the surrounding forest. Even those who hadn't seen the circled paw print had heard about it, and the strange incident had ignited a wildfire of theories. Blake emerged from his private cabin earlier than usual, having spent a restless night reviewing footage and fielding calls from increasingly impatient investors. The event was scheduled to go live in just 36 hours, and the promotional machine was already in full swing. Exclusive teasers had been sent to premium subscribers, promising an unprecedented wilderness encounter. The problem was, Blake still didn't have the climactic moment his marketing had promised. "Status," he demanded, striding into the command center where Olivia was reviewing overnight reports with Rachel. "Monarch made 2 appearances," Rachel replied, pulling up footage on the main screen. First at 11:42 p.m., then again at 3:17 a.m. Both times he approached to within 20 yards of the enclosure, remained for approximately 15 minutes, then retreated. And Ferdinand? Calm, almost unnaturally so. He acknowledged Monarch's presence, but showed no distress. If anything, he seemed expectant. Blake frowned. "What does Morris say about this behavior?" "He says it's unprecedented," Olivia interjected. "Domesticated cattle usually exhibit extreme stress responses to predator proximity. Ferdinand's reaction suggests either remarkable temperament or..." She hesitated. "Or what? Or some form of habituation we can't explain. Dr. Morris is running tests on Ferdinand's food and water to rule out any chemical factors that might be affecting his behavior." Blake snorted. "You think someone's drugging the bull to keep him calm? Why would anyone sabotage their own operation?" "Not everyone here shares your vision for how this should play out," Olivia reminded him gently. Something in her tone made Blake study her more carefully. "Including you?" Before she could answer, Dr. Morris entered, carrying a tablet. The biologist looked like he hadn't slept, his normally neat appearance disheveled. "We have a situation," he announced without preamble. The overnight drone survey identified multiple anomalies in the perimeter security. He connected his tablet to the main display, showing a composite map of the property. Red dots indicated locations where sensors or cameras had malfunctioned. During the night, "This is the 3rd consecutive night with this pattern," Dr. Morris continued. "At first, I thought it might be equipment failure or environmental factors. Now I'm certain it's deliberate interference." Blake studied the pattern with growing irritation. "Someone on the team is sabotaging us. Find them and fire them." "It's not that simple," Dr. Morris replied. "Look at the timing and sequence." He played a time-lapse visualization showing the failures occurring in a clockwise pattern around the enclosure, each location going dark just as Monarch was approaching that sector. "Are you suggesting the bear is disabling our equipment?" Blake asked incredulously. "Not exactly," Dr. Morris said, choosing his words carefully. "But the correlation between Monarch's movements and the system failures is statistically significant, and there's more." He swiped to a new image, showing 3 perfect circles etched into the dirt at the base of 3 different camera posts. Each, when taken offline during the night, the same marking as around the paw. "Imprint," Olivia observed, her voice barely above a whisper. Blake slammed his hand on the desk. "This is ridiculous. We're running a multi-million-dollar operation here, not chasing ghost stories. Someone is clearly trying to derail the project." "Nah, I don't think anyone is trying to derail anything," Rachel said, speaking up unexpectedly. All eyes turned to the technical director, who rarely offered opinions outside her area of expertise. "What I mean," she continued, "is that these aren't random acts of sabotage. There's a pattern, an intelligence behind them. The cameras aren't being destroyed, they're being selectively disabled in a way that creates a specific blind zone. It's almost like someone is creating a path." An uncomfortable silence fell over the command center as the implications of her statement sank in. Blake was the first to recover. You people need sleep. We're all getting caught up in mountain legends and jumping at shadows. The simplest explanation is that we have faulty equipment or local wildlife damaging the sensors. Local wildlife using tools to draw perfect circles? Doctor, Morris challenged. Enough, Blake cut him off. We go live tomorrow evening and I need results. If Monarch won't approach on his own, we need to make adjustments. What kind of adjustments? Olivia asked, a note of concern in her voice. Blake's expression hardened. Ferdinand needs to be more visible, more vulnerable. Remove the shelters from the enclosure. And I want the fencing modified. Lower it by 2 feet. Dr. Morris straightened, alarm clear on his face. That would give Monarch potential access to Ferdinand. It violates our safety protocols and the permits we obtained for this operation. The permits are for observation of natural behavior, Blake countered. We're simply increasing the likelihood of that behavior occurring. Make it happen. As he turned to leave, Olivia followed him outside, waiting until they were out of earshot before speaking. Blake, think about what you're doing. If something goes wrong, if Ferdinand is harmed, the legal implications could be severe, not to mention the ethical considerations. Since when do you care about ethics? Blake asked coldly. You've been with me from the beginning, Olivia. You've never questioned the premise before. I've never seen anything like this before, she replied. The equipment failures, the markings, Ferdinand's behavior, something isn't right here. We need to step back and reassess. Blake studied her face, seeing for the first time a resolve that hadn't been there in their previous years of working together. You're afraid, he realized. Yes, she admitted without hesitation, and you should be too. He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive in the clear mountain air. Fear is for people who have something to lose. My family built an empire by taking what others were afraid to touch. I'm not stopping now because of some technical glitches and campfire stories. Your grandfather built that empire, Olivia corrected him quietly. You were born into it. There's a difference. Something dangerous flashed in Blake's eyes. Get the enclosure modified as I requested, or clean out your office when we get back to civilization. Your choice. He walked away without waiting for her answer, his confidence never wavering despite the unease that had settled over the rest of the team. Behind him, Olivia stood motionless, torn between professional loyalty and an instinctive warning she couldn't ignore. Throughout the afternoon, the crew worked to implement Blake's changes. The shelters were removed from Ferdinand's enclosure, leaving the bull exposed to the elements. The fencing was modified, lowered to a height that still prevented the bull from escaping, but might allow a determined bear to climb over. Ferdinand watched the activity with what several crew members later described as uncanny awareness. The massive bull tracked the workers with his eyes, occasionally shifting his weight as if testing how the changes affected his environment. Once, when a worker dropped a tool near the fence, Ferdinand approached and pushed it back toward the man with his nose, a gesture so deliberate that the worker later requested to be reassigned to base camp. As sunset approached, Dr. Morris made one final plea to Blake, approaching him as he was reviewing the camera setup for the next day's live stream. Mr. Harrington, as the senior wildlife biologist on this project, I must formally object to the modifications you've ordered. They create an artificial and potentially dangerous situation for both animals. Blake didn't look up from his tablet. Your objection is noted. This isn't about bureaucracy, Dr. Morris persisted. There's something happening here that goes beyond normal wildlife behavior. Even your technical director sees it. These patterns of equipment failure, the markings, Ferdinand's behavior, they suggest an intelligence at work that we don't understand. At this, Blake finally looked up, his expression a mixture of amusement and contempt. Let me make something clear, Doctor. I don't pay you to speculate about mystical forces or conspiracy theories. I pay you to Provide scientific legitimacy to this operation so that when wealthy clients want to feel like they're participating in groundbreaking research, I can charge them accordingly." Dr. Morris's face flushed with anger. "You really don't care about the science at all, do you? Or the animals?" "I care about delivering what I promised," Blake replied coldly. "Everything else is secondary." The biologist straightened, his decision made. "Then I resign, effective immediately. I won't be part of whatever happens next." Blake shrugged. "Your assistant can handle the scientific commentary for the live stream. Security will escort you to your cabin to collect your belongings." As Dr. Morris was led away, Olivia approached Blake, her expression troubled. "That was a mistake. Morris is respected in his field. His resignation will raise questions. Questions that will be forgotten the moment Monarch and Ferdinand come." "Face to face," Blake replied dismissively. "The wildlife community isn't my audience, Olivia. My subscribers want spectacle, not lecture halls." Night fell over Silver Creek Ranch, the air unusually still. The modified enclosure stood starkly, illuminated by strategically placed lights that cast long shadows across the meadow. Ferdinand had settled in one corner, his massive form occasionally shifting as he dozed. In the command center, the night team monitored feeds with heightened attention. Blake had ordered double staffing, determined not to miss any potential activity. He himself remained on site, catching brief naps on a cot set up in a back room, unwilling to return to his cabin until he had the footage he needed. At precisely 1:17 a.m., the first sensor triggered. Monarch had returned. "Movement at the northeast perimeter," called out Jessica, the night shift supervisor. "Thermal signature consistent with our target." Blake was instantly alert, moving to stand behind her chair. "All cameras on that sector. I want every angle covered." On the monitors, Monarch's massive form materialized from the darkness, his heat signature a bright blob against the cooler background of the forest. The bear moved with deliberate steps, pausing frequently to test the air. "He's following the same approach pattern as previous nights," Rachel observed, having stayed late to monitor developments. "But the environment is different now," Blake said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Ferdinand is more exposed, more visible, and the fence is lower." As if proving his point, Monarch advanced further than he had on previous visits, emerging fully from the tree line to stand at the edge of the cleared area around the enclosure. In the artificial light, his enormous size became apparent, a mountain of muscle and fur with intelligent eyes that reflected the illumination like amber beacons. Ferdinand immediately rose to his feet, turning to face the bear. Rather than moving away from the potential threat, however, the bull stepped deliberately toward the edge of the enclosure, closest to Monarch. "Are you getting this?" Blake demanded, excitement building in his voice. "Every angle," Jessica confirmed, "all systems functioning normally." Then something unexpected happened. Monarch, instead of approaching the enclosure directly, began to circle it, maintaining a consistent distance as he had on previous nights. But this time, he was fully visible, his movements unhurried and purposeful. "What is he doing?" Blake muttered, frustration edging into his voice. "The fence is lower. He could easily approach." "Ferdinand now." As if in response to Blake's words, Monarch completed his circuit of the enclosure and then sat back on his haunches, facing the bull across 50 yards of open ground. Ferdinand, for his part, remained at the edge of the fence, his posture alert but unthreatening. "This is unprecedented behavior," Rachel commented quietly. "Grizzlies don't typically sit and observe potential prey for extended periods. They're efficient predators. They assess, then act." Minutes stretched into an hour as the standoff continued. Monarch remained seated, occasionally shifting position but never approaching closer. Ferdinand held his ground at the fence line, neither retreating nor exhibiting stress. Blake's initial excitement had long since turned to impatience. "This is useless footage," Subscribers want action, not a staring contest between two animals. Just as he finished speaking, the command center plunged into darkness. Every screen, every light, every system shut down simultaneously, leaving them in total blackness. "What the hell?" Blake shouted. "Get the backup generators online now." "Working on it," Jessica replied, her voice surprisingly calm in the darkness. The sound of keyboards clicking indicated the team was attempting to restore systems. After 30 seconds that felt like an eternity, emergency lighting flickered on, bathing the command center in an eerie red glow. The main systems, however, remained offline. "Status report," Blake demanded. "Main power cut at the source," Rachel reported, after checking a diagnostic panel. "Backup systems are attempting to initialize but encountering program errors. It's like the startup sequences have been corrupted." "That's impossible," Blake snapped. "Those are isolated systems with multiple redundancies." "Nevertheless, that's what's happening," Rachel replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm trying to restore basic functionality, but it'll take time." Blake grabbed a high-powered flashlight from an emergency kit. "I'm going out there. I want to see what's happening with my own eyes." "That's not advisable," Rachel warned. "Without functioning security systems, we have no way to monitor wildlife movements or ensure your safety." Blake ignored her, already heading for the door. Olivia, who had been silent during the crisis, moved to follow him. "You're not going alone," she stated firmly. Outside, the night was uncommonly dark, without the artificial lighting that had illuminated the clearing. Only the stars and a thin crescent moon provided any visibility. Blake swept his flashlight toward the enclosure, its beam cutting through the darkness. Ferdinand was still visible, standing in the same spot at the fence line. Of Monarch, there was no sign. "Where did he go?" Blake muttered, sweeping the light toward the tree line. As the beam passed across the forest edge, it briefly illuminated 2 points of reflected light, eyes watching from the darkness. Blake froze, the hair on the back of his neck rising as he realized they were positioned much higher than a bear on all fours would be. "Is he standing?" Olivia whispered, having seen the same reflection. Before Blake could answer, a new sound cut through the night. The distinct metal-on-metal noise of the enclosure gates swinging open. The security lock had disengaged. Blake swung his light toward the gate, in time to see it standing open, the way clear for Ferdinand to exit. But the bull made no move to escape. Instead, he remained perfectly still, watching the forest edge where Monarch had disappeared. "This is impossible," Blake said, his confident facade cracking for the first time. "That gate has a mechanical lock that requires a specific key. Even with the power out, it shouldn't open." From the darkness of the tree line came a sound unlike anything Blake had ever heard. Not quite a bear's growl, not quite a human vocalization, but something that raised primal fears in the deepest part of his brain. Without conscious thought, he took a step backward. "We need to get back to the command center," Olivia said urgently, tugging at his arm. "Something is very wrong here." For once, Blake didn't argue, allowing her to lead him back toward the relative safety of the building. As they retreated, he cast one final glance over his shoulder. In the beam of his flashlight, he caught a glimpse of something that would haunt him for years to come. Ferdinand, still standing calmly at the fence line, and beside him, no longer. Hidden in the forest, but standing in full view, Monarch reared up on his hind legs, his massive form silhouetted against the night sky. Between them, just visible in the dim light, was a dark figure that Blake's mind couldn't process. Neither bear nor human, but something that seemed to bridge the gap between the two worlds. The flashlight flickered and died, plunging the scene back into darkness. By the time they reached the command center, Blake's hands were shaking, and his certainty, the unshakable confidence that had defined his entire life, had suffered its first significant crack. Morning light filtered through the clouds as an emergency helicopter touched down on the helipad at Silver Creek Ranch. Blake had called in reinforcements, a specialized technical team from his headquarters in Seattle, equipped with advanced surveillance equipment and the latest in security technology. Whatever had happened during the night, he was determined not to let it derail his plans. In the cold light of day, the events from the previous night seemed less threatening, more explainable. The power failure had been resolved by dawn, attributed to a tripped main breaker. The open gate was chalked up to a mechanical failure in the locking mechanism. And whatever Blake thought he had seen in the darkness, well, the human mind was known to play tricks under stress. What couldn't be explained away, however, was Ferdinand's disappearance. The bull was gone from the enclosure, with no signs of struggle or forced removal. The gate had been found neatly closed when the systems came back online, the lock re-engaged, the tracking chip implanted beneath. Ferdinand's hide gave no signal, as if it had been deactivated or removed with surgical precision. $500,000 of prime beef doesn't just vanish, Blake raged, as the expanded team gathered in the command center for an emergency briefing. I want every inch of this property searched. Use the drones, the thermal imaging, whatever it takes. The mood among the original team members was subdued. Rachel spoke quietly with the new technical experts, her usual confidence notably diminished. Olivia sat apart from the others, her expression unreadable as she watched Blake pace the length of the room. What about Monarch? Asked Devon Harris, the head of the security team that had arrived with the helicopter. Any sign of the bear? Rachel shook her head. Nothing since last night. All tracking indicates he's moved deeper into the wilderness, away from our operation area. So we have a missing bull and a bear that's gone AWOL, Devon summarized. And you want us to salvage a live stream scheduled for this evening based on an interaction between these two animals. Blake stopped pacing, his jaw set in determination. The event isn't cancelled. 3,000 premium subscribers have already paid. Sponsors are lined up. We pivot. Pivot to what? Olivia asked, speaking for the first time. We have no animals, Blake. We have a mystery, he countered. We frame it as an investigation. The unexpected disappearance of Ferdinand, the strange behavior of Monarch, we turn it into a real-time detective story. Devon exchanged glances with Rachel, clearly skeptical. Your market research suggested subscribers want spectacle, not mystery. They want entertainment, Blake insisted, and they want exclusivity. We're giving them a front-row seat to something that's never been documented before. The discussions continued as teams were assigned to different aspects of the operation. The original technical crew would maintain base operations while security teams conducted ground searches. Drones would map the entire property from above, using thermal imaging to locate any large mammals in the area. As the meeting broke up, Olivia approached Blake. We need to talk, she said quietly. Alone. He followed her outside, where the morning air was crisp and thin, hinting at the approaching winter that would soon blanket the mountains in snow. I think we should shut it down, she said without preamble. All of it, the live stream, the operation, Apex experiences itself. Walk away while we still can. Blake stared at her as if she had suggested he cut off his own arm. Have you lost your mind? We're on the verge of the biggest event in the company's history. We're on the verge of something, all right, she agreed grimly, but I don't think it's what you think it is. Enlighten me, he challenged, crossing his arms. Olivia took a deep breath. I've been going through Dr. Morris's research notes. Before he left, he sent me files he'd been compiling about this region, specifically about local legends and historical accounts dating back to early settler days. Ghost stories. That's what has you spooked. Not ghost stories, she corrected. Consistent reports spanning over a century, all describing encounters with what the indigenous Blackfeet people called the Guardians, beings that exist at The boundary between human and animal consciousness, protectors of balance in the natural world. Blake laughed, but the sound lacked conviction. You can't seriously believe that fairy tales have anything to do with equipment failures and a missing bull. I believe that something intelligent is intervening in our operation, Olivia replied, steadily. Something that doesn't want this spectacle to happen. Call it what you want, guardians, spirits, or just highly unusual animal behavior, but ignoring it is dangerous. The only danger is to my reputation if I cancel a heavily promoted event based on campfire stories, Blake snapped. We proceed, as planned. The search teams will find Ferdinand, and we'll have our live stream. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, disappointment evident in her eyes. You saw something last night, something that scared you. I was there, Blake. I saw your face. A muscle twitched in his jaw. What I saw was a bear, and shadows playing tricks in bad lighting. Nothing more. She started to walk away, then paused. Dr. Morris warned that the local tribal elders believe disturbing the balance brings consequences, not just to the disturber, but to everything they value. She gestured toward the bustle of activity around them, the equipment, the personnel, the infrastructure of Blake's empire. Is this really worth the risk? He didn't answer, watching her retreating back with a mixture of anger and unwelcome doubt. Then he pushed the feeling aside and rejoined the search coordination team. There were practical matters to attend to, reality to deal with. The live stream would go on, with or without Ferdinand and Monarch. Throughout the day, search teams combed the property. Drones buzzed overhead, mapping thermal signatures against terrain features. By mid-afternoon, they had covered nearly 70% of the ranch's expansive acreage without finding any sign of Ferdinand. It's like he vanished, Devon reported, as the team leaders regrouped at the command center. No tracks, no disturbance in the underbrush where a bull that size would necessarily leave evidence. Nothing. What about Monarch? Blake asked. We've got occasional thermal hits consistent with a large bear, but they're all deep in the national forest adjacent to your property. He seems to be staying well clear of our operation now. Blake checked his watch. 3 hours until the scheduled live stream. Keep searching. Focus on water sources. Ferdinand will need to drink eventually. As the search continued, Blake retreated to his private office in the main lodge to prepare his opening remarks for the live stream. He had decided to lean into the mystery, framing the disappearance as an unprecedented wildlife behavior event that Apex Experiences was documenting in real time. It wasn't the spectacle he had promised, but it might be intriguing enough to maintain subscriber interest until they could locate the animals. A knock at his door interrupted his preparation. "Come in," he called, expecting Devon or Rachel with a search update. Instead, Jessica, the night shift supervisor from the previous evening, entered hesitantly. "Mr. Harrington, there's something you should see." She held out a tablet. This was captured by Drone 7 about 20 minutes ago near the northwest ridge. Blake took the tablet, expecting to see footage of Ferdinand or perhaps Monarch. Instead, the image showed a clearing in the forest where something had been arranged on the ground. Stones placed in a perfect circle, approximately 15 feet in diameter. Within the circle was a pattern of sticks and smaller stones that from the aerial view formed a distinct silhouette. "Is that a bull?" Blake asked, zooming in on the image. Jessica nodded. "And there's more." She swiped to the next image, taken from a different angle. The drone had captured part of a second formation outside the circle, another arrangement of stones and branches that appeared to form the beginning of a bear shape. "Where exactly is this?" Blake demanded, a chill running through him despite his determination to find rational explanations. "About 2 miles northwest of base camp, in a natural clearing near the ridge. It's not accessible by vehicle, rough terrain, dense forest." Blake stood abruptly. "I want to see it, personally. Have a team ready in 10 minutes, 2 security personnel with wilderness experience, and bring the best camera equipment we have. This is our live stream content. As Jessica hurried to make arrangements, Blake stared at the image on the tablet. The stone bull was uncannily accurate in its proportions, capturing Ferdinand's distinctive profile with a precision that seemed impossible for a random natural formation. The implications made him deeply uncomfortable, but his instinct for compelling content overrode his unease. Whatever was happening at Silver Creek Ranch, it would make for viewing that his subscribers had never experienced before. The journey to the Stone Circle took just over an hour on foot, with Blake leading the small expedition along game trails that wound through dense pine forest. Devon Harris accompanied him, along with 2 security team members and a videographer carrying a portable satellite uplink for the livestream. As they neared the coordinates, Blake felt a strange reluctance growing within him, as if some primitive part of his brain was warning him to turn back. He pushed through it, driven by the ticking clock of the scheduled broadcast and his own stubborn pride. The clearing appeared suddenly before them, a perfectly circular space among the towering pines, carpeted with soft grass that seemed oddly uniform for a natural meadow. And there, at its center, was the stone formation they had seen from above. "Jesus," Devon whispered as they approached the circle. "This isn't random. Someone made this." Blake circled the formation slowly, the videographer capturing everything. The stone bull was even more impressive up close. Hundreds of small rocks and twigs arranged with painstaking precision to create a 3-dimensional representation of Ferdinand. The level of detail was unsettling, down to the specific pattern of the bull's coat and the distinctive shape of his horns. "And that's Monarch," Devon added, pointing to the second formation that stood just outside the stone circle. The bear silhouette was equally detailed, positioned as if approaching the bull, but not yet entering the circle. "This had to take days to create," the videographer commented, panning across the scene. "Maybe weeks. The precision is incredible." "But who would do this?" Devon asked. "And why? We're miles from anywhere, and there's been no indication of trespassers on the property." Blake didn't answer, his attention caught by something at the edge of the clearing. A third arrangement of stones, smaller than the others, was partially hidden by low-growing bushes. This one didn't represent an animal. Instead, it formed a human shape, a silhouette that, with a jolt of recognition that sent ice through his veins, Blake realized was unmistakably his own. The figure was positioned outside the circle, separate. From both bull and bear, its stone arms raised, as if directing or controlling the scene. Around its neck hung a small pouch made from what appeared to be woven grass. Blake approached slowly, fighting the irrational fear that had begun to build within him. "What is this?" he muttered, reaching for the pouch. "I wouldn't touch that." "If I were you," Devon warned, but Blake ignored him, carefully removing the pouch from the stone figure. It was lighter than he expected, the material surprisingly soft against his fingers. With hesitant movements, he loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into his palm. A miniature camera fell out, one of the high-tech micro-units they had been using to monitor the enclosure. It had been deliberately placed with the stone figure, a message Blake couldn't misinterpret. "You are being watched as you watch others." "Start the live stream," Blake ordered, his voice betraying none of the unease coursing through him. "We're broadcasting from here." The videographer looked uncertain. "Are you sure this is unusual content?" "It's exactly what we need," Blake insisted. "Mystery, intrigue, something our subscribers have never seen before. Set up the equipment and get me a countdown." As the team prepared for the broadcast, Blake rehearsed his approach mentally. He would present the stone formations as an unexpected discovery, a mysterious element in the continuing saga of Ferdinand and Monarch. He would speculate about possible explanations, perhaps native artisans creating ritual spaces or an unknown artist using the wilderness as a canvas. He would not mention his growing certainty that whatever had created these formations was the same intelligence that had been interfering with their operation from the beginning. "We're live in 30 seconds, the videographer announced, positioning Blake at the edge of the stone circle, with the formations visible behind him. Blake straightened his jacket and adopted the confident smile that had sold millions in subscriptions. Whatever was happening, he was still Blake Harrington, and this was still his show. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're live. "Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Apex Experiences," Blake began, his voice smooth and practiced. "I'm coming to you live from a remote location in the heart of Silver Creek Ranch, where what began as a documented wildlife encounter has evolved into something far more intriguing." He gestured to the stone formations behind him. "What you're seeing is a discovery we made just hours ago, an elaborate arrangement of stones created by an unknown artist, depicting the very animals at the center of our event: Ferdinand, the champion bull, and Monarch, the legendary grizzly." As Blake continued his presentation, guiding viewers through the mystery and promising updates on the search for the missing bull, he failed to notice the subtle changes occurring around him. The wind, which had been a gentle breeze, died completely. The ambient sounds of the forest, birdsong, rustling leaves, the distant call of animals faded to silence. It was as if the natural world was holding its breath, waiting. Devon noticed first, his security training making him sensitive to environmental changes. He scanned the tree line, one hand instinctively moving to the sidearm concealed beneath his jacket. "Something's coming," he murmured to the nearest team member. "Stay alert." Blake, focused on the camera and his delivery, continued unaware. This unexpected development adds a new dimension to our understanding of the relationship between these magnificent creatures. What artist could capture their essence so precisely? What message are they? He stopped mid-sentence as he finally registered the unnatural silence. In that moment, a sound broke through, a deep rhythmic drumming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What the hell is that?" the videographer whispered, swinging the camera toward the edge of the clearing, where shadows had begun to deepen despite the afternoon sun. Blake felt it before he saw anything, a presence, a weight of attention that pressed against his consciousness like a physical force. Then movement caught his eye, and he turned to see Monarch emerge from the forest. The bear moved with deliberate grace, his massive form somehow appearing larger than Blake remembered. He approached the stone circle slowly, amber eyes fixed not on the humans, but on the stone representation of himself. Behind him, silent as a ghost, despite his enormous size, came Ferdinand. "My God!" Devon breathed, raising his weapon instinctively. "No!" Blake hissed. "Don't move, don't threaten them." To his surprise, he realized the videographer was still filming, the red light on the camera indicating that subscribers worldwide were witnessing this unprecedented moment. Ferdinand stopped beside Monarch, the bull and bear standing side by side at the edge of the stone circle. Neither animal showed any sign of aggression or fear, neither predator nor prey, but equals meeting in a space beyond human understanding. Then, as the team watched in stunned silence, a third figure stepped from the shadows between the trees, a form that seemed to shift between human and animal, neither one nor the other, but something that partook of both natures. It wore a covering of hides and furs, but its face remained in shadow beneath a headdress made from what appeared to be a bear's skull. The figure raised its arms in a gesture that mirrored the pose of Blake's stone effigy, and the drumming sound intensified. Ferdinand and Monarch moved in perfect unison, stepping precisely into the positions represented by their stone counterparts in the circle. "Are you getting this?" Blake whispered to the videographer, unable to tear his eyes away from the scene unfolding before them. "Every second," came the awed reply. "This is going out live to everyone." The mysterious figure then turned slowly until it faced Blake directly. Though he couldn't see its eyes beneath the headdress, Blake felt its gaze pierce through him, stripping away the layers of privilege and power that had insulated him his entire life. In that moment, he understood with perfect clarity that he was in the presence of something ancient and powerful, something that had watched over this land long before his ancestors had claimed ownership of it, and would remain long after his family's name was forgotten. The figure pointed directly at Blake, then at the stone representation of him. With deliberate movements, it knelt and brushed away the stone figure, erasing it from the circle. The message couldn't have been clearer. You do not belong in this sacred space. As if responding to an unheard command, Ferdinand and Monarch turned in unison and walked back toward the forest edge. The figure remained for a moment longer, its attention still fixed on Blake, before it too melted back into the shadows, leaving only the stone circle and the disturbed pattern where Blake's effigy had been. The silence held for several heartbeats, before Devon found his voice. What? What did we just witness? Blake couldn't answer. For the first time in his life, words failed him completely. The certainties that had defined his existence had been shattered in the span of minutes, replaced by questions he had never thought to ask. Behind him, the videographer lowered the camera with shaking hands. That went out to everyone. 3,000 live viewers just saw whatever that was. Blake turned slowly, his face pale. End the stream, he said quietly. We're done here. As they gathered their equipment to return to base camp, Blake paused. For one last look at the stone circle. The formation that had represented him was gone, but the representations of Ferdinand and Monarch remained untouched. In their arrangement, he could now see something he had missed before. They weren't positioned as adversaries, but as guardians, standing watch over the boundary between worlds. For the first time since arriving at Silver Creek Ranch, Blake Harrington felt like an intruder, a trespasser in a realm where his money and influence meant nothing. It was a feeling he would carry with him long after he left the mountain, a seed planted that would grow to change everything he thought he knew about his place in the natural order. 3 years passed since the Silver Creek incident. The event had faded from public consciousness, but for Blake Harrington, it remained vivid, a lightning strike that had divided his life into before and after. He stood on the observation deck of the newly built Silver Creek Conservation Center, watching Dr. Ethan Morris lead graduate students along a trail. The former antagonists had become allies, united by an experience that defied explanation and a commitment to protecting the land that had changed them both. The tour seems to be going well, Olivia said, joining Blake at the railing. She had remained with him through his transformation, her role evolving from content officer to conservation education director. Morris knows how to tell the story, Blake replied. The ecological aspects, the historical significance to the Blackfeet. People, though they never shared publicly what had truly happened at the Stone Circle. The Silver Creek livestream had briefly become internet legend. Over 3,000 subscribers witnessing something inexplicable before the feed was cut. Theories ranged from hoax to government experiment to alien encounter, but interest eventually waned. Within weeks, Blake had shuttered Apex Experiences. The digital infrastructure had mysteriously corrupted beyond recovery, as if the same force that disabled the cameras had reached through the internet to erase all evidence. The Foundation Board approved the expanded habitat corridor, Olivia informed him. We now have protected land connecting all the way to the National Forest. Blake nodded with satisfaction. The Harrington Wilderness Foundation, established with a significant portion of his fortune, had spent 3 years acquiring adjacent land, creating a private conservation area larger than some national parks. Any recent sightings? He asked, though they both knew what he really meant. The research team found unusual tracks near the North Ridge last week, larger than typical grizzly prints. Blake felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, but respectful awareness. And the circle? Unchanged since your last visit. After returning from the forest 3 years earlier, Blake had ordered the site left undisturbed. The only exception was his monthly solo hike to ensure the stone circle remained protected. The school group from the reservation arrives tomorrow, Olivia reminded him. And Claire Blackwood, that environmental journalist who's been trying to interview you. The one who suggested Silver Creek was an elaborate stunt to greenwash the Harrington image, Blake asked. You should talk to her. Not about what really happened, but about what you're doing now. That evening, Blake received news that his corporate environmental initiative had been approved, the largest carbon reduction commitment in business history. Against fierce opposition from traditional board members, he had leveraged his controlling interest to prioritize sustainability over short-term profits. His phone lit up with calls from board members and financial advisors, but Blake silenced it. They could wait until morning. Tonight belonged to a promise kept, not to shareholders, but to something more fundamental. Later, unable to sleep, Blake walked the familiar path to the stone circle. The carefully arranged rocks glowed faintly. In the moonlight, the formations of Ferdinand and Monarch remained undisturbed, eternal sentinels guarding the mystery. I kept my promise, Blake said softly. The land is protected, the balance respected. No dramatic manifestation greeted his words, but as a breeze rustled through the trees, Blake felt an unmistakable sense of acknowledgement, of approval. When Claire Blackwood interviewed him the next day, she found herself facing a man vastly different from the shallow socialite she had researched. This Blake Harrington spoke with quiet conviction about responsibility, stewardship, and interconnectedness. Some experiences change you too fundamentally to explain, he told her when she asked about the Silver Creek incident. What matters isn't what happened then, but what happens next. That's an awfully convenient way to avoid answering the question, Claire countered. The questions we think are important rarely are, Blake replied. The right question isn't what changed me, but what changes all of us when we truly understand our place in the natural world. That evening, as sunset painted the mountains gold, Blake stood once more on the observation deck. In the valley below, a black bull, a descendant from the small conservation herd he now maintained, grazed peacefully. And at the forest edge, just visible in the gathering shadows, a massive shape watched with patient, ancient eyes. Guardian and protector, witness and participant, roles that Blake Harrington, unlikely inheritor of ancient wisdom, had come to understand from both sides of the eternal circle. Dear listeners, we hope Blake Harrington's journey from exploitation to conservation has touched your hearts. His encounter with forces beyond understanding reminds us that transformation often comes from unexpected sources. To explore more stories of personal change and connection with nature, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and mysterious connections. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Has nature ever changed